You know what's funny? On Sunday, I was sitting around thinking, man, I don't know what I'm going to do for content. We've got the finals, but apart from that, there's not a lot of news going on. And then that same day, we get the Victor Oladipo trade stuff, and Doc Rivers gets fired from the Clippers. The NBA is truly the king of content. Anyway, welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and you guys already know what we're going to be talking about in today's video, and that is the LA Clippers making the decision to move on from Doc Rivers as their head coach. And for me personally, this was a bit of surprising news to get. Even with the 3-1 collapse, I felt like he was such an integral part of the organization that wasn't a move that they would end up making, but of course, I was wrong. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about how this impacts the Clippers, where Doc could potentially go, and what coaches could potentially replace him in LA. But really quickly before we get started, if you enjoy content like this, then consider subscribing. I upload basically every single day, and leaving a like rating is a great way to let me know that you're enjoying the content, and it helps the video out a ton as well, which helps me out obviously. And of course, if you haven't already, I would highly recommend that you come and hang out with me over on Twitch at Spolo_TD. We've been having a lot of fun over there, setting viewership records each and every single day. Thank you to everybody that has continued to show up every day. And if you haven't yet, come hang out. I'm probably live right now. With that said, let's go and get started. Okay, so the Doc Rivers thing. I understand why some people don't like Doc Rivers as a coach. Maybe there's a bit of a lack of adjustments there. Maybe he is a bit too much of a player's coach. But I had always thought that he was a really good fit in LA for that second part of that, making sure that Paul George and Kawhi Leonard are happy and catering towards what they want. Now, I'm not trying to say that Doc Rivers doesn't actually coach these guys and that all he does is what the superstars want to do. But when you're in a situation like LA is, and you have a maximum of 2 guaranteed years with these two superstars and the possibility that they're going to opt out in the summer 2021, you don't really want a head coach that's going to be bugging these guys and potentially forcing them to leave. So I had anticipated that even after the 3-1 collapse, even after they continued to double Nikola Jokic in the post, the best passing big man in the entire league, even after there was a lack of adjustments made to the rotation throughout that Nuggets series that I think ultimately caused them to lose the series. Even with those things in mind, I felt like Doc Rivers was a respected coach. He's a good, not great NBA coach, and I felt like he was going to stay, mostly because I didn't see a great replacement out there on the market for him. But ultimately, that wasn't the case. And there's a couple of different aspects to this. The first is, did Kawhi and Paul George push Doc Rivers out? Because ultimately, this is an organization that is held hostage by these two superstars. Because if these guys both leave in 2021, they're going to be the worst franchise in the league for at least the next 10 years. They have no draft picks, no young assets, no anything. Their team would be awful, and it would be in a really, really bad situation. So if they had come to the organization and been like, you know what, I don't like this Doc Rivers guy anymore, let's get a new head coach, they probably would have listened. However, it doesn't seem like that's exactly what happened. We got a report yesterday that basically indicated that Steve Ballmer had started to make the decision that he was going to fire Doc Rivers as coach, and he went to players, prominent players within the Clippers, most notably Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, and said, hey, what do you guys think about this? And none of them, or at least not Kawhi or PG, stood up and said, no, let's keep Doc Rivers. I really, really want him to be the coach. And that's an important distinction. It's not that they pushed him out. It's not that they went to ownership and said, get rid of him. It's that they didn't stand up for him and advocate for him when the idea of possibly firing Doc Rivers came up. So that's a really, really important distinction. As far as what this means for the Clippers moving forward, I do still question the move. And maybe I'm being too stubborn about this. Maybe I'm overrating Doc Rivers as a coach. But I don't really see a ton of really good options out there on the market. And right now, the indication appears to be that they're going to go with, or at least their top choice potentially is Ty Lue, who is an assistant on the staff right now. And like my thing is, if you're gonna get rid of Doc Rivers and hire Ty Lue, a guy from the exact same staff, a guy that certainly is no better as an NBA head coach than Doc Rivers, then what's the point? What's the point of bringing in someone that ultimately is probably going to give you very, very similar results, if not slightly worse results? And the only thing that I can think of is that the organization wanted to show a level of accountability for losing a 3-1 lead in the postseason and for performing the way that they did in the postseason. And Steve Ballmer wants to show, hey, if you don't perform, if you don't, perform up to the standard that we've set as an organization, there's going to be consequences. Here's the accountability. I'm firing a coach that is generally well respected, and we intended to be here for a long time. We're going to go and move on from him because of this 3-1 lead. That's the only thing that I can think of if you're going to then go and do the Ty Lue thing. Apart from that, Jeff Van Gundy has been rumored. Other than that, there really haven't been a lot of coaches linked to the Clippers, because I think generally this is not something that they expected to do after this season. And I don't know who they're going to end up hiring. Ty Lue had an interview with the Philadelphia 76ers, who at one point I thought they had already hired, to be completely honest. Van Gundy is, of course, in play. I have no idea who they're going to end up hiring. I'm sure Kawhi and Paul George will have some input on that. As far as Doc Rivers, there's some interesting fits around the league. Initially, you might think, oh, maybe the Oklahoma City Thunder, they've got a young roster. Maybe that could be an interesting fit. They're really concerned about finances right now. That's why they didn't bring back Billy Donovan, and Doc Rivers ultimately is probably just going to be too expensive for them. But there is a team, if they don't have that same expense issue, I think could be really interesting for Doc Rivers, and that's the New Orleans Pelicans. They have been searching for an established head coach. Everything they've done since David Griffin got there, they haven't been experimenting. They've been bringing in proven guys, whether it's players and ideally coaches as well with this coaching search, that they think are going to help them grow and develop all these other young assets that they have on the roster. It's the reason they brought in guys like JJ Redick rather than going to get more young players. They want a veteran presence. They want guys that know what it's like to play in the NBA and to coach in the NBA, and Doc Rivers would be a really good example of that. I think that would be a good fit. I think it would be an interesting fit. And ultimately, if I had to guess one team, I'd say that he would probably end up there. Now, there could be some random head coach that gets fired. There could be an opening that opens up now because Doc Rivers is on the head coaching market, but who knows? Ultimately, it was a decision that I did not anticipate and I did not expect, and I kind of understand the reasoning behind if you're going with the accountability angle. And also, I'm sure some people just thought he didn't coach well enough and he needed to be fired. And I understand that, but when you're talking about that and you're trying to make that decision, you also have to consider the replacements and who you could potentially put in there as your head coach now. And if you're a Clippers fan, you're sitting there thinking, okay, we got rid of Doc, but who's our next coach going to be? And how confident are you that even as bad as Doc was at sometimes in that postseason series, how confident are you that the next guy is going to be any better? Now, could you find some young assistant coach and it works out really well? Sure, I'm sure that could happen. Could you find a veteran that finds new life and is actually a really good coach in LA? That's possible. But you're also dealing with a situation that involves so much risk and involves so much that is up in the air right now that would make me really, really nervous. Going with some sort of young assistant or going with, a veteran coach that's been out of the league for a handful of years. This next year is a make it or break it year for the next 10 years of the Clippers franchise. If this doesn't go well, if they don't perform well in the postseason, basically if they don't win the title next year, Kawhi and Paul George could possibly leave, and that leaves your franchise in the worst spot that any franchise has ever been in NBA history. Worse than the Nets, worse than the Cavs when they traded away all their first-round picks and they had to create a rule barring trading away your future first-round picks. Worse than either of those situations because of the draft compensation that's been given away, because of the lack of young talent on the roster. So this head coaching decision is going to be critical, not only for next season and their potential championship chase, but also for the next 10 or so years of whatever the Clippers feel like doing with their franchise for the next decade. So a huge decision. I'm really interested to see what they do. Maybe they go out of nowhere with someone that I'm not even thinking of to be their next head coach like the Nets did with Steve Nash. But right now, I certainly have a lot of questions about the decision itself. But yeah, that's going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.